much for joining me today
Hi.
on my channel. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, it's an absolute honor to be here, first of all. I remember we met through Instagram. You had reposted something from my page, and I just thought, oh my gosh, like I've come up on such a gem talking about linguistics and languages. So yeah, I'm Laura. I go by Lauri. That's how I teach. That's how I run my Instagram page, Languages with Lauri. I am a student in the United States, and I'm a native English speaker, but I learned Spanish and Russian, and I'm learning German in university. But of course, everything is still a process. I'm not fluent in Russian yet. And everything is still just a kind of conglomeration of maintaining everything that I've learned and combining it with the things that I am learning. So that's a little of my background.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. And I think
Sure.
that, I think that as I am interested, and as we talked before with your languages, that it's such an interesting choice. It's I don't come across very many people in the States who are learning Russian.
Right.
What is your motivation for learning Russian?
So basically, when I was 14, I had a lot of dance classmates who were Russian. They were from Siberia, they were from Ukraine, they were from Russia, they were from all over the former Soviet Union. So not just Russians, but Russian speakers. And I just remember them speaking to each other, and I thought, I want to understand them so much. It was never portrayed in the United States media as a beautiful language. We like to think of French, Spanish, something else as like being romantic and beautiful. But when I heard Russian in person for the first time, I was 14, and I thought, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my life. So.
It really is such an interesting language, and I haven't had as much experience with that as say Spanish, of course.
Right.
But yeah, and I think that definitely like Spanish is much more common, much more prevalent within the States. Like you go out pretty much anywhere and you have Spanish speakers, so we definitely have far more people learning Spanish. German as well is one of those languages that we don't have quite as many learners of over here, although I know in some states it's a bit more than others. And over there, do you find that, because I'm in California, we don't have really too many German speakers, but I know like if you go north, there's somewhat of a German population. Like my university that I'm taking my classes for Spanish in is Oregon State University. It's not here, but they have a full-on German bachelor's degree because they have so many speakers up there of German.
Right, yeah. So the North has a lot of German speakers, obviously, especially during the mid-1900s, like when, or in the early 1900s, when some of my family members came from Germany to the U.S. They lived in the North. But where I live, after Spanish, of course, is the second most spoken language. After English, we have German. There's a surprising number of German rocket scientists and people like that here who were brought over maybe after the war, but they have, of course, children here, they have grandchildren here, and there's even an Oktoberfest, or there used to be an Oktoberfest. So they are around. It's just hard to tell.
We have Oktoberfest this year as well, but there's just kind of like a, I don't know that all of the people who necessarily like participate in them and do them realize they're German like influence. They're like, oh, Oktoberfest, like let's do this.
Oh, wonderful.
But we do at least use the term over here. And yeah, so we have, okay, so you 4 languages then: Russian, English, of course, Spanish, and German. Am I missing anything?
No. I did have some interesting experiences with Serbo-Croatian. At some point, I was learning Afrikaans and Swahili. I've been experimented with like Polish and Ukrainian. So there's parts of that are still left that I sometimes find useful. Obviously not Swahili; it doesn't come up in my daily life. But interacting with Poles who speak Russian or Ukrainians who speak Russian, even going to Ukraine, some of that has been useful and influential to me. So
have you had have you gone to Ukraine?
I was in Ukraine, yes, in the summer in Odessa, and there's a wonderful group of English teachers and English learning people there. They're just honestly some of my best friends. They're fantastic, and they honestly are responsible for a lot of why I am where I am today.
Mhm.
These people just encouraging, supportive, and just some of the smartest people in the world, in my opinion.
Oh,
So
you know, you need to check out my my friend, my colleague. She's on Instagram. She has Sasha, I believe I need to check the name of her Instagram account, but she's Ukrainian and she speaks Russian and Ukrainian and she's an English teacher.
wow.
And she has a YouTube channel as well. So she is public YouTube and Instagram, and she is one of those potentially not the same English group that you know over there, but an English teacher over there. So
Wonderful.
yeah, yeah, there definitely is a the English teacher community over there, and I guess I will. So when I put your information down here in the description for this video for Instagram, I will add hers as well. So that will be there
Wonderful.
with you, and then that'll be there for anyone else here who would like to check out either of those accounts, who is interested in any of those languages, in
Super.
Russian, Ukrainian, English, teachers, any of that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. And so over there, then I'm curious, when you were in Ukraine, did you find that speaking Russian, was that enough to be, or did you use your Russian quite a bit when you were over there, or did you
I
use
did.
English?
I honestly feel like if one doesn't speak Russian and they go
Mhm.
to a city, maybe not one of the biggest cities where you can find a guide, like a college age guide who speaks
Yeah.
decent English, I feel like you wouldn't survive because a lot of the menus don't even have English. A lot of the signs and street signs don't have transliteration in the Latin alphabet.
Mhm.
And so it'd be very hard to
Mm.
find your way around. Of course, my English speaking friends want to practice with a native, they want to speak with me. And so we did speak English some, but of course, I'm demanding my Russian practice. And so there were a lot of days I'd just go out and talk to people on the street and talk to people in restaurants and just speak Russian all day, which was a dream for me. So.
It's so interesting too that you can do that, because you know Ukraine has their own language. They have Ukrainian, but you can also go and just use Russian, like pretty much
Right. Yeah.
anywhere.
So 80% or maybe something around approximately 80% of Odessa speaks Russian habitually.
Mhm.
So maybe only 10-15% of the time did I actually
Oh.
hear Ukrainian. It's
Oh.
popular in music and on the signs and menus, of course, but a lot of people speak Russian at home. So even if someone spoke Ukrainian to me, I respond in Russian and they say, "Oh yeah, okay, you're a Russian speaker.
Oh,
Let's chat."
okay.
Right. So it can go either way depending on where you are,
Yeah.
as to which one is more dominant. But I found that incredibly interesting.
Okay. And Odessa, I guess I should look at a map. I don't know where Odessa is. My friend that you mentioned, she's in Kiev.
Oh,
Is that
and
anywhere? Yeah.
yeah, so it's the capital, right? So
Yeah, that is the capital.
yeah, mainly Ukrainian there. I have some
Okay.
friends there. But
More
Odessa's,
Ukrainian.
it's on the Black Sea. There were some efforts to change signs
Okay.
and things like that over to Ukrainian, but
Mhm.
everything
That
you
makes
will hear is going to be Russian. So.
that makes sense. And the closer you get to Russia, the more Russian I'm sure
Yeah,
you would
yeah.
hear. Because I know we were also talking about at some point with Sasha, that, and another person learning Ukrainian as well. They had mentioned that within Ukraine, it's a very interesting country, because there is Ukrainian, there's Russian, and then there's also different languages around the borders, like some that aren't even Ukrainian or Russian. I don't know if you
Right.
experienced any interaction with
There's
other languages,
Yeah,
but
there's an interesting blend. I thought about bringing up. It's called surjik, and it's
okay.
something between Russian and Ukrainian. So there may be some structures that carry over between the two, or some vocabulary that's a little different than what you would hear in true Russian, true Ukrainian. And it's mostly those people who speak both, and it's kind of blended together. So I spoke to a lot of surjik speakers.
Okay.
It was interesting because I think, oh, we don't say it like that, right, in Russia. But so my Russian friends will call one thing one way, and they'll call something similar, but it'll be different. So
Yeah. And were you able to understand any of these other languages? Like, can you understand any Ukrainian or
I
any of
can,
these other
I
languages a little bit?
can. I can. Especially written, if I can see something written down, it makes it a lot easier. But there are some similarities, like the word for what in Russian, right, is что. Most people know that что. In Ukrainian, it's more like что. And this is something that's changed, obviously, but it's similar enough that when you're hearing people speak, you can piece it together and maybe get 50, 60%.
Oh, that's quite a bit. So it's a bit like, for me, I know when I've spoken with people who speak Portuguese, and I can understand pretty much like you said, like maybe like 60, maybe sometimes closer to 70. Like I can understand quite a bit, and I don't know any Portuguese. But you go to other languages like Italian, and I can't understand. It's like now down to like 20, 30%, even though they're the same families. So I imagine it's somewhat like some of the languages, like maybe Ukrainian, and maybe some of the other dialects or languages, or however they're called, like different amounts. But it definitely is nice that you have those pieces, at least a little bit, that you can understand.
Right, it's wonderful. Yeah, it's a good experience.
And okay, so you're in languages. So why are you so interested in languages? What do you do? What do you study?
So I study basically a combination of international business and German, but suitable for the workforce, like being able to professionally interact in German. I was interested in that not only because I have German heritage, I feel like I owe it to my heritage to learn German, but also because I think German is not just incredibly useful for business, but a large amount of people speak it. It's just a wonderful language to learn for literature, for culture, not just for business and interacting professionally. But Russian is one of those too. It's like an undiscovered art for so many people. But reading Pushkin in the original, for example, is completely different. And learning songs that are poetry, and you just understand like the feeling, the soul, right? They say like "Ruskaya dusha," like the Russian soul, and they say, "Oh yeah, like you can't understand." Eventually, you start understanding how they think, how they feel, and it's so addictive and interesting. I just don't think I could live on a daily basis without some kind of other language in my life.
Yeah, I feel that way too, especially like you said it very well with reading in other languages, and especially reading, because you get to access language at more depth when you're reading, because in order to write you have to really organize and like have the there's just more depth to it. And when you go into reading in that language, I think that it is it's different, and it's very difficult to say how it's different, because it's something that you experience and you're like, oh yeah, I feel this.
Right.
And then when you read a translation, it's a translation, like it's an interpretation of that feeling that the reader gets when they read that story or that novel. So it's
I love this, and I love talking to people like you who have experienced that and understand that, because it's so rare. And I think especially in American culture, where it's not required to graduate speaking 3 or 4 languages fluently, we've kind of lost the gem of language learning in the way of Duolingo and other platforms. Oh, learn this in just 5 minutes a day. And people, they're disappointed because they realize that this is not just a 5 minutes a day to be fluent. It's a way of life. It's changing how you think, how you see things, how you feel like is the right way to talk about things, the right way to see things. You have to change it. You have to have that mental flexibility to fully just absorb what it means to speak and communicate in another language. And that's the most beautiful thing to me. I feel like so many people miss out on. So I'd love to encourage that. Yeah.
I think so too. And yeah, even we don't even have to have 2 languages when you graduate high school. Like you kind of have to like dabble a little bit. You have to take a couple years, but at least I can speak for myself. Graduated from high school, I couldn't speak Spanish. I had taken a couple classes, but it was just like, like it made it easier to actually learn it later, having some exposure, but it was nothing really. And yeah, I think that there definitely is a lack of knowledge around languages for here, both the ability to use the languages and just understanding how languages are learned and what they like what that does. And of course they go hand in hand. You can't really learn one without the other. But I think that with that, and then like you said, with platforms, there's like Duolingo, there's like different platforms, and people think that, oh, okay, like I can do like a little bit, and it's sort of a selling point, like 5 minutes a day, something like that. And it's it is, like you said, like a lifestyle of learning. It's like part of who you are. And I think that the disconnect is perhaps between, like, we have bilingual and trilingual people here, especially like in California, Spanish speakers who have moved here. We have just a ton of Spanish speakers over here, and they're bilingual, but it's seen as like, oh, you are bilingual, like you just are because you grew up speaking Spanish and English. And people don't necessarily realize that they can become bilingual. They can, or trilingual, or however. And that disconnect is the identity of being bilingual or knowing multiple languages. Like people who are bilingual, it's known that, like, on their side and on the side of others, that language is part of their life. Like if they're from Mexico and they move here, they're Mexican and they're American and they speak Spanish and they speak English, and that's their identity. So I think that what we need to teach people is that, like, when you choose another language to learn, that's becoming part of your identity.
It does. It feels cheesy to say. I think for a lot of people, they're like, yes, I feel Spanish now. They don't feel like they will be understood because it's so uncommon to truly master it at that level. And that's why we love finding each other. But I think part of the disappointment of, I would say, I'm not throwing shade on Duolingo, but the Duolingo culture, right? The 5 minutes a day culture. Part of their disappointment is that in school, they felt like perhaps they are not good at learning languages. And so then they see this program and they think, oh, this is going to be my ticket to finally learn, right? They want to learn. They have a hunger for learning. And then they are disappointed and they think, well, it's okay, I'm just bad at languages. And so part of my campaign, right, to people is, you're not bad at languages. You just haven't learned how you learn. And I feel like it gives a lot of my students hope to say, yes, you failed English in high school in Russia or in Israel, but it's okay because you are learning now and you're learning how you learn. It's a process. And so we need to teach people to fall in love with the process of learning and not just, oh, I said hola with the perfect accent and now people are going to like me. They're going to think I'm smart. It needs to be different than that. Right.
Exactly. And I use Duolingo. Like, I like Duolingo. I'm using it right now for my Mandarin, but I use it as a sort of passive practice in addition to my Mandarin classes that I do with a tutor, and then I do my own practice. But it's very useful to me to have something to just like passive, like it's a sort of mindless way to get a little bit of immersion in by practicing on there. And it's like, it's a starting place or a supplement, I found, and I've used it as in those two areas. I've used it with my Spanish, I've used it with my French, and it's been very beneficial. But it is definitely not a curriculum, and anything you do use, like, even I have classes with the tutor, that is not alone enough. Like, you need many pieces. And I think that's the biggest thing to get students and people and anyone learning to understand, is that any one thing is not enough. You need to use, like, have a core curriculum or structure that you use, and then you need to add in all of the pieces around it that work specifically for you.
Right. I totally agree. And I think, that adapting, right? So you have a class, you have a tutor, you have Duolingo, you have all these things that have been given to you, right? And there's one important piece a lot of people never develop, and that is, how do I learn? How do I absorb?
That's true.
To memorize, right? And neuroplasticity is so important in that, right? Just your mental flexibility, your ability to comprehend. Okay, this language, like Russian, they don't have a word for an or the. Like, they don't have articles. How do I deal with that, right? How do I deal with cases? How do I deal with 6 cases? How do I deal with 4 cases? What are cases? Why do we have them, right? And so you need that flexibility. But
could you please tell me what cases are?
What cases? Oh my gosh. Should I tell?
Please.
So, for example, if you say in German, ich gehe in die Bibliothek, I go to the library, right? You say die Bibliothek. But if you're in the library, you say ich bin in der Bibliothek. And so now it looks like library is masculine, but it's not masculine. It changes cases from nominative feminine to accusative, right? Which doesn't change what it looks like. It's still die for accusative for feminine case. It's still die for this gender and accusative, but once you're in the library, you're now saying dative. And so you've changed from die to der. And so now there's all these videos on Instagram making fun of it. They're like, no, that's accusative, but it looks the same as nominative. Okay, no, you're in the library now. You're not going there. Now it's dative. And so now you're going to change the words, right? And in Russian, it changes even the noun itself. Sometimes, like where you are, you don't just have a preposition, you have a actual change to the ending of the word to say you're going there or you're there without needing other words. You just know, right?
So it's a bit like it sounds. It's the different cases, like the different situations, and then the change in the structure. And
right. So if you say, for example, the Russian word for a house is dom, moi dom, right? A house, just house by itself, that's nominative, it's a normal word, right? And then you want to say the house of my father, right? You don't say my father's house. This is English thinking, my father's house. And so you start thinking, moi отец, my father, okay, but how do we say his house, right? And then you end up saying dom моего отца. So you've changed мой отец to моего отца. So it's not my father, it's of my father. And that's how cases just change everything.
The restructuring. Yeah. And I agree, like when I was learning Spanish, especially Spanish, because that was my first foreign language, I had to learn that. And the thing is, when you're learning, especially a first foreign language, is that you're not just learning the language, you're learning language. You're learning how to structure language, how to learn language, and a bit of the linguistic side. Because you don't have to process, like as a monolingual person, you don't, even if you grow up bilingual, like if you grow up speaking two languages and they're both native languages, you still don't have to process language the way you do when you learn a foreign language. You don't have to learn all of those structures in order to learn it. Like you don't need to know necessarily how to conjugate verbs or how to use indirect object pronouns from the grammatical side. You just need to speak.
Right.
So it's quite a bit different. And then, like, as you mentioned with the cases and understanding all of that, native speakers make all those changes. They adjust in different situations, but they don't necessarily realize they're doing it. They just do it naturally.
Right. So many times I wish I was born as a Russian native. Because when I started learning cases and I realized, oh my gosh, dom моего отца, like I can even say my father's house without changing cases. And I thought, this is why people quit Russian. Like, why wasn't I just born a Russian native who understands? And then I started teaching English and I realized how grateful I am to have been born an English native because we park on the driveway and we drive on the parkway. And I'm so thankful I don't have to learn that. So
I love that example. Yeah. This is true. Yeah. Yeah, English is a tough language.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't need cases to be difficult. Let's just say that. Yeah.
All right, let's end with this. Let's end on a light note. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming to join me for this video, for conversation. This was a lot of fun. And I will be linking your information to Instagram down below, so anyone who wants to see more about what you do, your studygram, all of your things on there, and they can come see you. And I will be responding to questions in the comments down below after this.
So awesome. Super. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to not just meet people like you, but have open dialogue with people like you. And so just thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.